All right, so there's lots of ways I could solve this. One way is actually to graph it for sure and find out where it crosses the x-axis and do the synthetic division. But sometimes you could factor by grouping. So factor by grouping, you could probably do it like this. And I think, what can I factor out of these first two terms? Well, they both have an x squared at least. So I look for the numbers, nothing I can factor number-wise. But I could probably factor out an x squared. And then I got to think to myself, what do I multiply x by to get x cubed? Just x, right? And then what do I multiply x squared by to get 2x squared plus 2? Now over here, if I have a negative sign here, I'm always going to pull out the negative sign. So if I notice that 3 goes into 3 and 3 also goes into 6. So I'm going to pull out my negative 3. Negative 3 times x gives me negative 3x. Negative 3 times positive 2 gives me negative 6. All that is set equal to 0. Now what's interesting, if I factor out, both of these have an x plus 2. So if I factor out the x plus 2, then the remaining parentheses are just going to be x squared minus 3. And that's equal to 0. Remember that once I have something factored, then I'm going to have to set both factors to 0. So if I say x plus 2 equals 0, then I also have to say x squared minus 3 equals 0, and then we'll solve. So this one's pretty easy. I'm just going to subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 2. This one I'm going to have to add 3 to both sides, and I get x squared equals positive 3. Now, I need to know what x is, so I'm going to have to take the square root of x squared to get just the x. Now remember, whenever we take the square root of something, that it's technically plus or minus the square root of 3. So then our solution is x equals negative 2, x equals positive root 3, and x equals negative square root of 3. Also, if you were to do that on your calculator, it's approximately plus or minus 1.73. Now don't go putting your stuff away. We're not done yet. That's one way to do it. Another way to do that, and let me zoom out. Everybody grab your handy dandy calculators. Let's graph it. So if I go in here and I clear this out, I'm going to say x cubed plus 2x squared. This is what it'll look like for some of your older calculators. Minus 3x minus 6. And then I'm going to hit zoom fit. So just plug in the graph. Go to zoom fit. And you'll get something like this. Now I'm going to actually do zoom standard. And I see that it looks like it touches at negative 2. Or actually, no. Where does it touch at? I'm going to have to zoom in a little better. Well, let me just make this big, so I can see it better. Okay, it looks like it crosses at negative 2, doesn't it? So I'm going to hit trace negative 2 just to verify. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So another way to do this is if it crosses at -2, over to the side I could do synthetic division. So I could say -2, and then remember I've got 1, 2, -3, and then -6. I'm going to drop down the 1. -2 times 2 is -2. Those drop down, I get 0. This times this gives me 0. This drops down, becomes -3. That becomes +6. So my remainder is 0. Remember that this is x squared, this is x, and then that's that. So then my other factor is x squared minus 3, right? And then from there you would do this part. Does that make sense? Okay, now I'm going to do a couple more of those examples later today, so if you want to see that again, I know we kind of went over it quickly, but check back later.